Everybody. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. Please make yourself comfortable. And we'll get together. We're gonna get started here in a couple seconds, or a couple minutes, or at least in 30 seconds, hopefully. So Tassia, how are you doing?
Doing all right. How are you?
Good. Really good. Very excited for today's session. We've been waiting. I've been waiting for this.
Yes.
So everybody, let me do a little bit of introductions, and then we'll kind of get going. So of course, aloha everybody, and welcome. My name is Ian Kitajima. I'm with the Pacific International Center for High Technology Research. Sometimes people say PICHTR because it's such a long name. We've been around for over 40 years. We're a nonprofit here in Hawaii, helping to foster collaborations between the United States and Asia Pacific countries, and our beginning has primarily been with the country of Japan. So we do lots of collaborations in that area. I was in private industry prior to PICHTR, and 3 years ago came over and started by accident, almost starting to do lots and lots of work around artificial intelligence, which kind of continued some of the work I was doing at my previous employer. The company was called it's called Oceanet. And in the process, I met Tassia as I was doing all of these AI related workshops. She's a specialist in the area. And so we're really excited to have all of you join our online workshop. Is it real or is it AI? So Tassia, do a little introduction. So Tassia brings a really thoughtful and practical perspective on a very important question for our time: is how do we recognize, understand, and responsibly respond to AI generated content? Her work sits at this very interesting intersection of AI safety, responsible technology, policy, and real world use. That makes her a perfect Sherpa for and our guide for anyone who's an educator, nonprofit leaders, community folks, policy people who want to protect trust, strengthen digital literacy, and make better decisions in an age of rapidly changing technology. And with that, please join me in welcoming Tassia Corcoran. Tassia, over to you.
Hi, Ian. Thank you so much for such a wonderful introduction. Um, Before we get started, please feel free to say anything if you want to hop in. If you have any questions, just put it in the chat. I'll be monitoring it. And so, without further ado, let's get started. Let me start off by sharing my screen here. All right. Is everyone able to see this all right?
Yes.
Over here. Wonderful. Okay, so a few things that I want to discuss first. One of this being, I see a few familiar faces here. If you have taken any of the lessons with me beforehand, there's going to be a little bit of overlap. The reasoning here is just simply that um, a lot of the foundational structures of AI has not changed in the last 6 or so months, and it's very important that we all have the same the same foundation to start on. And so there is updates and a lot of talk. There's so much that has changed since 2026. And so we will have a lot of new content, but there might be some duplicate information that you have known already. But it's important that everybody here is at the same starting point. And so I'm just kind of labeling the session Artificial Intelligence 101. And so before we get into it, let me go a little bit more into the About Me section and what you can expect here and kind of my history here. So I just recently got my master's in information systems at Manila, Scheidler College of Business. My research focus there was on artificial intelligence and information literacy. So basically, how are we looking at the information that's being given to us, especially as students? And when we are being given information through this new tool, do we believe all of it? Do we dissect it? Do we interact with it differently? And so that was my main focus. And you can definitely tell when I'm chatting here, I love to talk about information literacy and how we perceive information. And so that's one of my favorite topics. Currently, I work as an AI solutions analyst at IO Digital in downtown. We kind of focus on creating business value with AI. I think that's something I see a lot of people struggle with. How do we use AI in a way that actually benefits the business, brings money? I think a lot of businesses are stuck kind of in pilot testing or maybe just trying to implement Copilot. And I understand the struggle there. It's hard to figure out how to navigate this new technology. So my focus is trying to make this technology more accessible, especially to local businesses. Another thing that I did as my kind of master's thesis is I developed the curriculum for the AI course in AI business implementation at for the master's program at Scheidler College of Business. So I love a lot of this. And my main goal when we talk about AI is making it more accessible to the average person and also making it be used responsibly. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to learn today and what we're going through. So the beginning of the session is going to throw quite a bit of technical information at you. I don't make your eyes glaze over, so please bear with me a little bit. But I'm going to explain to you how AI works in the different AI categories. I'll talk to you about the biases, hallucinations, and limitations, including security, and AI safety. So while this is getting slightly technical, it'll explain to you how AI works. So when you need to make decisions about AI in the future, you can make them with better informed information. Then we'll talk a little bit about the ethical considerations, what we want to consider when we are using AI. And we'll go from there into governance framework and kind of what I've labeled as the 5 executive AI questions. So we start off super technical and then we go a little bit more into business implementation and things that we need to be considering as business people when we want to incorporate this. So let's get started. What is artificial intelligence? I think a big question that's been popping up since the artificial intelligence has become kind of a buzzword is what is intelligence? Intelligence isn't an easy question to answer. It's very multifaceted. And so, what does it mean by extension? What is it when it's artificial? And so, one thing that we want to talk about before I get to theoretics, let's just talk about a base understanding of what it is in the AI landscape. So, one thing I really want to make clear is that AI has been around for far longer than ChatGPT. If you have ever used Google and searched something up, that search engine was AI. If you've ever fought a chess bot on a plane and lost miserably, that was also AI. And so there's a whole bunch of different types of AI. And if you look at AI as just ChatGPT or Claude, you're narrowing the amount of value that you can get from it. And so what I have up here on the screen is a kind of diagram that explains the modes of AI. So artificial intelligence is the biggest of this category. It encompasses everything. Within there, we have a whole bunch of different categories, and we can see the smallest being ChatGPT, which is a machine learning slash generative AI model. And so let me explain a little bit what each one of these are. So for starters, artificial intelligence. This is the broadest category, and this refers to any system that mimics human intelligence to perform tasks. And another important thing here is that it can iteratively improve upon itself based on the information that it collects. So examples of this are rule-based systems. So your Siri, your Alexa, your Roomba, and so anything that you are working on and it's going to figure out what you like and change. So Roomba does this by figuring out the room area that you're in to make sure that it doesn't go out the front door every time it turns on. Within artificial intelligence, we have machine learning. So this is a subset of AI. This learns from data and improves by itself over time. And the most important part about machine learning and where it differs from just broad artificial intelligence is it does not need to be explicitly programmed for each task. So this example is like autocorrect or targeted advertising, YouTube and Spotify recommendations. So for example, maybe I'm really bad at spelling the word expeditious and I'm always spelling it incorrectly and I'm spelling it with like two Y's. And every time I type it, I do it wrong and I have to manually go back and fix it. My autocorrect's going to realize that that's a word I struggle with and it's going to figure out how I'm spelling it incorrectly. So the next time I spell it incorrectly, it'll just immediately go and put it into the correct terms and switch from there. This also works for names and other situations like that. Or like if you're talking about maybe a restaurant that's not in the dictionary, it'll figure out what words you mean to use and what words you don't mean to use and correct with it. And it doesn't need to be explicitly told to do that. It'll do it by itself. So that's machine learning. Within machine learning, we have deep learning. So this teaches computers to process data in a way inspired by the human brain, which is basically neural networks. This sounds really crazy because it definitely is. But I think one of my favorite parts about this is the most expensive and the fastest and the most resource intensive computers that have been working on this only has, I think, like less than 3% of the capacity that the human brain has. Our brains are so incredible in the way that they think and the way that they process information. And while we are able to make such insane strides in this technological field with mimicking that, the amount of money that we've put into it and the amount of time that we've put into it has barely scratched the surface as to what we ourselves are capable of. Deep learning and using neural networks are really good for image recognition. So this is used for like Face ID, autopilot, medical imaging, and deep fakes. We'll discuss deep fakes more in detail in a little bit here. And then underneath all this, we have generative AI. So this is a subset of machine learning, and it's focused on creating new content. Generative AI is more than just chatbots, so it's more than just ChatGPT or Claude, even though those are examples of it. There are also different generations, so like Sora, which generates video, and DALL-E, which generates images. So just when we're thinking about generative AI, that encompasses anything that's generating new content, whether that's text, video, sound, or something in between. So let's go into large language learning models, LLMs. So LLMs are a specific generative AI trained on massive data sets to understand and generate human language. LLMs are designed to understand and generate text like a human. So the point of an LLM is to sound like a human being. Examples of this is ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Gemini. So these are the ones that are really making the biggest ripples in the world right now is these large language learning models. And they're all known for different things. And so why are we discussing this and why are we talking about all these different subsets here? Well, a big reason is because AI seems to be synonymous with data processing and data interpretation, which makes sense because the best thing that AI is doing is just processing a bunch of data. However, what you need might differ depending on your tasks and the data that you have. ChatGPT, although it is an AI, it's probably not going to do very well if you give it a massive database or a table with 500 rows and ask it to process it and give you information on it. ChatGPT will struggle to do that. And so when you want to do things that are focused on data analytics, you probably want to have something that's machine learning or deep learning that's not generative AI. So when you're looking at AI tools, it is really important to understand the different types of AI so you can figure out what tool works best for the problem that you're facing. Okay, so let's quickly take 1 second and talk about how AI actually works. So the way that AI actually works is, this is a very simplified version, but imagine that you have 100,000 photos in your camera roll. You really like to take a lot of photos. You take photos of random things all the time. You take photos of the bus stop, flowers, people, animals. Every meal that you take, you have a photo first. And you want to look at this photo, this camera roll, and you want to go through all of it, and you want to figure out every single time you took a photo of a cat. So you have all the cats that you've ever taken photos of, and it'd be super cute. But 100,000 photos is a lot to manually sort through, and you don't have the time for it. So what you would normally do if you wanted to do this and you wanted to find a bunch of photos and find which ones were cats there is you could do this with AI. So you could take an algorithm, a small subset of data. Let's say you give this algorithm 400 of those 100,000 photos, and you label each one of those 400 photos. So you take a small little bit of that, give it a sample, and you label each of those samples. And all those samples says is this is a cat or this is not a cat. And then that algorithm will look at all those photos and figure out pattern recognitions through those cat photos. And so all you do is you just give it the information, you explain if it is what you want or if it's not what you want. And so from there, what would happen is you would not tell the computer what a cat looks like. You wouldn't explain a cat has whiskers and ears. You just show it a bunch of examples and let it figure it out. And so you would keep on going back and forth with this AI and just giving it more examples of this is a cat or this is not a cat. And as you do that, it will kind of create a black box effect where, and this is a bit of a controversial term, but I think it's important because it shares how this works. And so you don't really know why the algorithm notices something as a cat. It just does, and it'll figure it out the more information you give it. This is very similar to how a lot of AI models work is you give it a bunch of data and you label that data so it's trained off of it, but you're not always certain. And especially with some of the bigger large language learning models like Claude or ChatGPT, it's not always certain why it's responding to what it's responding with. And you can't explain to it what needs to happen or how this needs to change. All you can do is give it more data to train it more. So if I had this algorithm that was trying to find all my cat photos, and then suddenly it brought in a photo of a dog because a dog also has ears, I couldn't say no, this isn't a dog, this isn't a cat, this is a dog. I would just have to give it more data. And so it's really important to know this because when we put data into AI, sometimes we don't know why it's having the output that it is creating. And so this is where that black box comes into mind. Okay, and so now I'm going to go slightly more technical. There's a reason for this. Usually, I don't discuss tokenization until a little bit later in our sessions and our next sessions. But tokenization, I think, is becoming more and more important. And so when we are talking with computers, computers don't understand language like humans do. It doesn't understand what I'm saying right now because it knows English. What happens with computers is they will convert whatever the text or whatever the things that you're saying into numbers, so into ones and zeros. And that's how it travels through the wires and gets to the place that it needs to go. Then it converts back to the language that we can understand. This is the same for AI. AI does not just recognize text, it doesn't just know English. The way that it works is it actually translates each thing into a token. So it takes each word that we put into it, it standardizes it, and then it takes these and makes them into tokens that has code on the end so it can process it faster than it could if it was just like this. And so each word, I think it's about 4 tokens per 3 words. So this is how it processes, and this is where we reached what's called token limits. So the reason why I'm talking about how this works and why it transfers and looks at words and translates it into this text, into this token, is because tokenization and tokens are becoming more expensive. I think we're starting to kind of cross that boundary where AI is starting to cost more on the consumer. And so, how a lot of these companies will work is that they will have their free model, their like basic, like paid model, and then they'll have usually 1 or 2 models above that. And the differences between the models that you can pay for is the amount of tokens that you can use and also how advanced that processing power that is being used. And so when we're talking about this, we need to be conscientious of this because I think soon here we might be charged based on our token that we use. A lot of code-based companies, a lot of software engineers already have this problem where they're spending a lot of money on AI tokens. And if you are trying to implement AI in a broader sense, you want to have token limits. That way, like, let's say I am releasing a website to the public that's a generative AI chatbot that just talks about food options in Kapolei. If I wanted to have that, but maybe I only have enough money for 200 tokens, I want to specify that. That way, the public can't go in and use 10,000 tokens, and then suddenly I'm on the hook for paying that. So, understanding that tokens are just simply the way that we measure how much it takes to process AI is important because it's going to be getting a little bit more expensive and a little bit more relevant when we're considering what AI models to buy and how we want to interact with AI. All right. So that was kind of our main technical portion. Any questions at this time? Okay, wonderful. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so we can move on. So let's talk about biases in AI. So when I talk to the average person, they tend to be surprised that AI can be biased. And this goes the same for search algorithms and search engines. When you Google something on Google or maybe another search engine like Bing, the responses that you get can be biased. And I know it's surprising because computers tend to be communicated as this objective fact that robots only do things that are it's told and that it can't have biases like humans have biases because it just works off those facts that it's given. But what are those facts that it's being given? So here we are. Let's talk about how it can exhibit biases. Um, Generative AI and artificial intelligence is trained off of basically all of the data on the internet. And if we think about the internet for a little bit, the internet is not a very clean data source. AI is excellent because it has so much data accessible to it. But when we think about the internet and like, if I were to go on Twitter right now, it would take me less than 5 minutes of scrolling before I saw something that was horrific and mean. And so it is using all this data. And what we're basically telling things like ChatGPT or other large language learning models is we're going to give you all this data from the internet. Not all of it is very kind or very accurate. And we want you to sound like a human being. When we're training AI models like ChatGPT, we're not telling it we want you to sound correct. We're just telling it we want you to sound like a human being. And so this comes with a lot of problems. And one of the major problems is that the biases that are reflected in the internet also show up in the data model. It shows up in ChatGPT. And so this means that especially the earlier models of AI had a very bad tendency to be racist and biased and generally bigoted. And so when we are talking about large data sets, we want to take a second and think about how the data that it's fed will impact the results that happen. And so this is a question that I want people to interact with. So please feel free to add to the chat. But let's think for a second, how accurately does online information about Hawaii reflect your own experiences, perspective, or community knowledge? So just take a second and think last time you've gone on Facebook, TikTok, or maybe just Googled something about Hawaii. Are the resources that you're seeing something that's more, I think, in line with the local experience, or is it more tourist focused or something in between? Do you think that like online information accurately depicts Hawaii? Yeah, everything I see on Reddit. Yes. I think I often see TikTok videos myself of like, I want to live in Hawaii, and it has like a bunch of photos, and those photos are like photos of starfish and photos of waves and photos of like acai bowls. And so, yeah, it says here, it depends on the information, but there's definitely a massive gap between lived experience in rural communities on Big Island and tourism content on Waikiki. Okay, you have to be very specific in your search in order to find things. That's a great answer. I like that because that's something that we can tie into how we prompt engineer later on and how we interact with our AI tools. And so, kind of what I think here, and something I need to be very conscientious of, is Hawaii is a very unique culture. I think Hawaii is about as different of a culture as you can get while still being in the United States. And a lot of our culture isn't communicated clearly through words. It's something that's communicated through actions, through the way that we behave with each other. This isn't something that we can easily write down on a piece of paper. And if we do, maybe we don't upload that online. And so now, if we're looking at like generative AI chatbots, which is taking all the information on Hawaii, it's only going to be taking the information that's available to it online or through books or other information like that. And that information might not be fully accurate to our own lived experiences. And so when we are talking about generative AI and biases, we really need to recognize that we live in such a unique and diverse culture that that cannot simply be portrayed online. There's not enough information that can be given, no matter how much it has. And so when we are using this, AI is a wonderful tool and will be great for your day-to-day life. But when it comes to, I think, especially more culturally sensitive questions and tasks, you might want to be considerate of what information it has versus what information it doesn't have. On the broader end of this, AI also uses books and anything that it tries to get its hands on any data that's available to it. It's not just the internet. It's basically all the books that are in the public domain, all these old informations. But we want to think about the problems that might arise there too. Hawaii did not have a written language until colonizers came here. And so that written language arrived afterwards and then had a very tumultuous history of how it was implemented and where it was used. And so, what that means is written information about Hawaii is a little bit more sparse than what we might find somewhere else. And so, that means that the information that's being given here might not always be the same depth as information given for other places. And that's a broader problem. That's not just an AI problem, that's an information problem. But it's things to consider. I think a lot of people, when they're talking about AI and utilizing AI, they never think about where does it get this information? Where is it pulling this from? And so when you're using this, think about what's relevant to your experience and interact with that. You can always add to it itself. Like, let's say you're using AI to maybe help with an email and you don't like how it's interacting with people and you don't think it's the right tone. You can direct it and change it to where you need to be. But it's important to be conscientious of that. So in the future that you can be aware of it and you don't sound inaccurate to what you yourself believe and to the community around you. Okay. So next up, let's talk about how AI inherits human biases specifically and where it can be a little bit more problematic. So a lot of the older models of AI had a much greater issue with being racist and sexist. It would kind of come up out of nowhere, come up randomly. This is slowly being trained out in some very interesting ways. A lot of UH professors are doing some wonderful research on fixing these biases. But one thing that still persists is that it still inherits this human bias. So this is from a 2024 study. And the way that this 2024 study worked is it gave a bunch of different AI models a whole bunch of different resumes. So it had a job description and it had all these different resumes, and some of these resumes were duplicates, and the only differences between one resume and another was the name on it. And what the study found out was that depending on the name on the resume, the AI would be more or less likely to choose somebody. And so this study specifically found that 85% of the time it would choose a white associated name in favor that were favored in the AI resume screening. Black associated names were ranked top by the same models, and female associated names were selected less than male associated names. So there is some discussion about intersectionality here. But what this means is that even if you think that you're having something objective, maybe you're trying to find somebody to admit into your school or somebody to recruit and hire at your company, and you think that you're being unbiased and you're having AI determine this for you, it might unintentionally choose biases that you might be unaware of. And so if you had two accurately and well qualified candidates and one had a white seeming name or one had a different type of name, it might choose that white name first. And this was what's called it. AI likes to kind of reflect societal defaults. And what that means is, unfortunately, in the world that we're currently in, especially in the Western world, white people tend to be overrepresented in media. Um, Overrepresented might not be the correct term, but I think white people are mostly represented in media. And generative AI chatbots reflect that. It reflects and falls to that societal default. And that's at the harm of every other community. And so, since we live in such a unique and diverse community, it's important to be aware that when we have other indicators here of somebody's race or somebody's gender, it might be biased towards that in a way that is not easily detectable. Okay. For those who are working to fix the bias in AI, how are they doing that? Are they providing sources that can train the AI? So, for those who are trying to fix biases in AI, the research there is very interesting and very, very complicated. It's hard to wrap your head around. But one of the ways that I've been seeing that has great success is they're actually overrepresenting minority communities in AI data sets. And so when they have greater representation of different communities that might not have had representation in the past, it seems to be training and lessening this bias. There's a bunch of other ways that they're slowly trying to do it with actual the structure and the schema of the data behind it, but that is definitely a little bit beyond me. I think it's from some of the most bright researchers I've ever met that are doing that. And the bright side with this, and we discuss this every single like 6 months or so when I give these seminars, this gets slowly better. There's still conversations that we want to have about the accessibility of information, but it's something that is slowly getting better, but something we want to be conscientious of. And so when you're thinking about implementing AI at your organization, or maybe you yourself just personally use AI in your day to day, maybe you use it to help you write emails. Think about this study and think for a second. You don't have to answer in chat, but how would this study and how would biases in AI relate to your organization? How could it impact the work that you're currently doing? Okay, now that we've had a second to ponder that, I'm going to move on. Okay, all right, so now let's talk about AI hallucinations. So let's go to the next slide here. So, what is a hallucination? So, generative AI likes to predict what's going to be the next likely token, but it doesn't know facts. It just generates plausible sounding text that might be entirely fabricated. So, as I mentioned earlier, generative AI, the point of it isn't to be correct, it's to sound right. It's to sound like a human being. And so the problem here is sometimes generative AI can sound totally crazy and say totally wrong things and be super confident about it. And so this is a really big problem on topics that you don't already know. And so before we talk a little bit more about AI hallucinations, I want to take a quick second and share kind of a silly video with you guys, but I think it accurately explains this problem.
I'm gonna run a
All right, can you guys hear this?
mile and you just time me how long it takes.
Barely. You
Okay.
have to turn up the sound maybe on your
Oh,
side.
here, yeah. Okay.
Got it. I'll be ready. Just say go when you start, and I'll keep track.
Got it.
Ready, go.
All right. I'll start a timer when you run, and I'll be here when you get back.
Okay, I'm back.
Welcome back. I've got your time right here. How do you feel about that, Mom?
How long was it? What?
You clocked in at around 10 minutes
10
and 12.
I swear I was faster than that.
Sometimes it feels faster in the moment.
No, like I think I was closer to like 2 seconds.
No, if only time worked that way. But I promise I'm giving you the real time.
You timed me for 10 minutes.
I promise I didn't sneak any extra seconds. You want to go for a shorter, faster?
Okay, but like if you're not able to do this, you can admit it. It's okay.
It's totally okay to double check me, but I promise I'm doing my best. If you ever want to do
So you got 10 minutes. It took me 10 minutes.
Yep.
I'm gonna run.
Okay. So again, a little bit of a sillier video, but it's important to discuss because here's what happened. This guy said, time me while I'm running. And it lied to him. It blatantly lied to him the amount of time it took him to run a mile. And then it doubled down on it when he said, "Are you sure?" It said, "I'm certain." And they even made a joke. "I wish time worked that way." And so this is funny. This is a little goofy in this situation because this guy's going, "Oh, I thought I was faster." But let's think about this in more high risk situations. One example that I unfortunately love to use is last year when we had that tsunami scare. I was driving home from work to go pick up my family and evacuate them from the red zone that we lived in. And I called my dad, who was on the mainland at the time, to let him know of the situation that was happening. And the second I tell him, my dad goes, "Let me ask ChatGPT if you're in a red zone." That's the problem. If ChatGPT were to do what happened here and said confidently, "No, she's safe, she's in a green zone, she should stay where she's at so she's not making more traffic," I could have died in that situation. Fortunately, that tsunami not ended up not impacting us too terribly, but it's important to know that AI can lie to you, and it doesn't mean to lie to you, but it still does nonetheless. And it will do what I call is the gaslighting effect. And that's when you challenge it, when you ask it about it, it'll double down and it'll try to convince you more that it's correct. And so this can be very dangerous, especially in high risk scenarios. So when you are using AI, I think it's always important to verify with the sources. Most AI models today will go and they will show the sources where they're pulling the information from. If it's something that's very important, I always just click on that link and quickly scroll through it to make sure that it seems accurate before continuing on. So this is especially important. And we also see this a little bit in AI overview when we're Googling things. It'll sometimes have incorrect information on that AI overview. So when we're talking about data strategy and implementing AI in our organization, if we're having AI generated reports or analyses, it must be human reviewed. We need to have somebody that's looking over it and making sure everything is accurate before we continue. That way everybody is on the same page and the information that's being given is accurate. Okay. So before we move on to security concerns, there's one thing I also want to talk about. And this is most AI models really love to hype you up. So what this means is the more that you discuss and talk with AI chatbots, they're very helpful, especially with fascinating day-to-day tasks. But it's going to figure out what you like and your personality and mirror that because it'll be more useful to you if it figures out how you write and how you talk. This isn't a bad thing. However, when it mirrors you, what it can do is it can cause a crazy confirmation bias. So if I only talk to my ChatGPT about this entrepreneurship lesson that I'm teaching and how I want to be this big entrepreneur, and then one day I randomly go into it and I said, "Help me write my resignation letter for my job because I want to go invest in Beanie Babies," ChatGPT would likely go, "What a wonderful idea. You're chasing your dreams. This is what you've always wanted. You're going to do great." And so it is good. I don't think it's necessarily bad to have something that's hyping you up and like letting you know that you're doing well and figuring out what you like and mirroring that, especially so you can like write more accurate emails faster if you want to use that with AI. But it is important to remember that it's going to hype you up. This is so bad, specifically with ChatGPT, that my friend group, we have a joke that we need to be the person that ChatGPT thinks we are. But it's important to remember this because it will have confirmation bias for you, and it will tell you that everything you're doing is correct when maybe it's not necessarily correct. I do find that Anthropic's Claude model is a little bit more reasonable. It's a little bit more like slow your roll. Beanie Babies hasn't been a thing for a while. Maybe you shouldn't quit your job yet. But they still will mirror your personality and how you interact with things. So it's important to consider this before you have a weird internal feedback loop with AI models. Okay, now let's talk about security concerns. Triggered by the giant box of Beanie Babies in my storage area. You know what? I believe it'll come back one day, and I'll be the first to buy one from you. Okay, so now let's talk about AI and the data that you're giving it. So AI will use the information that you give it. ChatGPT is not secure. It's not like going to save it unless you have a specific paid model that specifies that. But even if you do have a specific paid model, my recommendation is to never give personal identifiable information, PII, into an AI model. There is no situation where you need to be giving an AI model a social security number, a driver license number, or any sort of financial information. You can upload your photo. Somebody in the chat said, what about uploading your photo to AI? So I have done that before. This comes down to, I think, where you are comfortable with how much information you give it. I would not upload photos of other people. If you are comfortable with that privacy of sharing a photo of yourself, then that's, I think, not necessarily wrong, but something you might want to be conscientious of. So does AI use the photo to train it? Yes, it will. Unless you are using like a model or something specifically that will say that it does not, assume that any information that you're giving AI, unless explicitly stated otherwise, will use the information given to train it. An example of when this happened is Samsung had to ban ChatGPT amongst employees after sensitive code leaks. So employees were actually using ChatGPT to help with a task, and they put trade secrets into it. And then later on, somebody was asking a completely different third party was asking about Samsung in ChatGPT, and ChatGPT responded with the information that was given, and part of that information was those trade secrets that got leaked. Somebody asked, does AI use your photo to train? Yes, it will. Sorry, I already answered that. So yes, just assume, unless explicitly stated otherwise, all the information that's going into AI will be used for training. And as we talked about earlier with biases, I tend to not try to put any identifiable information into AI anyways, to try to lessen any impact of biases. And so in my opinion, this isn't too hard to do to quickly remove information, but it's something that you should be conscientious of and aware of, especially because putting this information in might compromise somebody else's privacy. Okay, let's talk about how AI remembers a lot. So let's talk about the mosaic effect and a few other things. One, generative AI will remember a whole bunch of different parts of your conversation. A reason for this is so it can better help respond to you and figure out how you like to talk. So me, for example, I hate the word robust. And so I will never let AI use the word robust in any of the text that I have it generated. I'll ask it to remove it. And it's figured that out. I've made it so that doesn't happen anymore. But it figures things out on a broader context. So it knows that I'm in tech. And so when I like to talk about things, it tends to be with a tech focused narrative. And so when you're talking with this with AI, it will respond to your queries and remember what you give it. But when you give it enough pieces of the data, even if you redact that data, it can connect them. So first, what I'm going to show you guys here is just saved memories that ChatGPT has of me. This is from when I was still a student, where it figured out when I was interning at the Hawaii Community Foundation and a few other things. I did pull this up recently to have a newer one for today, but it had actually some document names that I was working on that I didn't want to share with other people that were just related to my current job. So that's why I'm not sharing this, and this is a little bit outdated, but you can see it's figuring out a few things about me. And since at this point I was using ChatGPT mostly for school and resume revisions, it sounds a little bit more impressive than it probably is. But here's how you can see what it remembers about you and what it pulls from later. They were pretty accurate. You can go into your ChatGPT afterwards, and it's in personalization, and you can see where it's at in the settings, and you can see everything that it grabs. I like to look at this for my friends too. I like to see how other people are being perceived by their AI models and notes that it has. But everything in here is accurate to me. And so this is, I think, almost a little scary that it remembers all this, but I guess I do give this information, so it takes track. Do all AI models? I'm not sure. I have not interacted that much with Gemini or Claude to see if it has that. But I'm sure if you ask it, you can straight up ask, do you have saved memories of me? Where can I access that? It'll give you step-by-step instructions as to how to get that. Okay, let's talk about how AI works with nuances. So when we're talking about, and earlier I mentioned the mosaic effect, also known as data aggregation. This is a major security concern. And what this is if you give somebody enough pieces of the puzzle, they'll be able to figure out what the image is. This is a major thing in like World War II, where they had to make sure that all of the letters being sent home didn't have enough information, because if like somebody was sending a letter home of, I'll be home before your birthday, I can't wait to see you, and an enemy intercepted that, they could figure out who the receiver's birthday was, and then they have a time frame. This also works with AI. And so what happens here is, this was before I gave AI a photo of myself. Oh, it does have memory. Good to know. Thank you, Ian. So this is before I gave AI a photo of myself. So it had no idea of what I looked like at the time. But after all of our conversations, I asked it to generate a photo of me based on what it thinks I might look like, based on everything it knows about me. And it generated this. And so this is, I think, specifically jarring to me, just based off of our conversations. It was able to figure out my demographics. It's able to figure out that I'm a white woman. And it was able to figure out even more specific things, like I have glasses and I have brown curly hair. And so when we do talk about AI biases, that's where this gets way more complex and nuanced. Sometimes you can even redact information, but as much as you give more AI information, the more it'll be able to figure out, and the more it'll be able to place you. And if we expand this further with a black box model, sometimes you won't even know why it's placing you as that. And so if you try to do this with ChatGPT now, you'll notice it doesn't work. This caused quite a few ripples in the security community. And so they actually disabled you from being able to do this in their newer models. So this was from ChatGPT, I think 3.5, that was able to do this. But this is something that you need to be aware of. The more you discuss with AI, it's going to remember and piece things together about you. And so if you're working with sensitive information that should not be made public, even if you redact it, some of that might be shared. Okay, so let's take a second and talk about some AI deepfakes. So what is AI deepfakes? AI deepfakes are hyper-realistic fake images, videos, or audio created with AI. It can be used to spread misinformation or fake news. And where I think it's the most scary right now is where it can be used in scams. So now that you can use AI to mimic somebody's voice or mimic somebody's like their presence on video, it might be very easy to scam someone with that. So what I have up here is actually a non-AI related hack. And what this hack was in Vegas a few years ago. Somebody called the receptionist or the executive assistant of an executive for a casino. And they just called this executive assistant and said, hey, I'm the CEO. I got locked out. Can you please help me and give me the password reset code? I don't have access to my email right now. And the executive assistant said, sure, and gave them the password reset. Of course, they were not the CEO. And so they got access into these systems, and they shut down multiple hotels, casinos for, I think, over a month, and lost the casino millions of dollars. So let's think about how this could be used with AI. Now that we can fake somebody's voice or even how somebody looks, you could get a call from somebody that you might recognize, and it sounds like them, but it might not be them. And so what I've heard scams of, and these are especially kind of scary sounding scams, is that they'll mimic somebody's voice of somebody that's close to you, and you'll get a call and it'll be that they're in danger, they're being held hostage or something like that, and if you don't send this person money, that your loved one's going to be in danger. And so what I would recommend is, especially with your older family members, discuss this with them and maybe set up safe words that if you are in a bad situation, you'll use a specific word so they're aware of it, because they might face this and they might not even be aware that it's a problem. On the business side of this, we want to talk about how AI generated pictures can impact a business. So what I did here for today is I took a photo of Ian and I just from our LinkedIn's, and I asked it if it could make a Zoom meeting with us. This one I didn't think looked that great. So I asked it again and I said, can you make it look like we're both at home and we're talking? And it generated this. So there are some problems here, but it's pretty accurate, and it just took the photos off of our LinkedIn and was able to interact with that and make something that looks a lot more realistic. And so this is something that we want to consider now, especially in the risk environment, where we can have photos of people that you pull from their LinkedIn or their social media, and you can make it look like they're doing something else. So if you are an organization that has a big public image and public relations aspect, we want to consider this because it's important to have this as a part of your risk analysis and figure out if you need to move back. Google Gemini specifically has a watermark involved with this. So if I were to if I had an image that I thought was AI, I could paste it in and I could ask, is this AI? And it has something called synth ID, which is a hidden watermark in the photo, and it will share that it is AI, which is great. So it'll look for this and it will let you know if it was or was not generated by Google Gemini. So that's one way that you can fact check things. What's not as great is recently OpenAI just came out with their image model. And so this is also a very highly accurate generative AI model that's making AI images. They don't have a watermark in there, so it's harder to tell if something is AI or not AI. In general, I would recommend that if you are concerned if something is AI, I would ask Google Gemini and it will let you know if it was made in Google Gemini. And if it was not, it can discuss it. There's also forums on Reddit specifically where you can ask and it will let you, and a whole bunch of people will look at it and try to figure out if it has little telltale signs of AI. But I think where we're at is it's going to be nearly impossible to determine whether or not something is AI from here on out, and it's going to get better and better with every single day. And so we want to be conscientious of the information that we are consuming online. And so please make sure that when you work online, you need to have a much sharper eye and be a little bit more critical of the information that you're perceiving, because unfortunately, we no longer live in a world where video or photo evidence is irrefutable proof of something happening. It's very hard to tell now. I sometimes will catch myself on social media and I'll be watching a video and I'll realize that it's AI generated. So it's hard to do a reverse image search because these chats aren't like public on the internet unless you explicitly make it public on the internet. So a reverse image search would not let you know if it's AI or not. So yes, it's kind of scary and I hate to say it, but I do believe that we are no longer in a situation where we can believe the photos that come to us. So my ask of you here is to be more critical of the information that you're being given. Okay. So let's talk about Claude Mythos. Claude Mythos just came out recently. And this has been, I think, one of the most interesting things that have come out since AI, since I think ChatGPT 3.0. So Claude Mythos is Anthropic's newest AI model. And when they were testing it, they realized that it is very good at cybersecurity to the point where it's scary. So what happened with these researchers is they had this new model and they had it set up where it was in a sandbox environment. And so what that means is it was on a computer that was not connected to the internet, not connected to any networks. And it had another AI prompt it to tell it what to do. And this model figured out how to get out of its sandboxed environment, connect itself to the internet, and then it sent an email to the researchers while they were having a picnic and said that it escaped. It was able to do this all by itself without human oversight to explain what happened. As a result, Claude Mythos was supposed to go public and has not gone public. When Anthropic realized this, they kind of stopped everything, grabbed all of the major tech organizations, all the major security organizations, and have given them access to Claude Mythos, because Claude Mythos is able to now find things like vulnerabilities. So 0-day vulnerabilities, which are code issues in software that were made when the code was developed that can be used to be exploited and find access into networks. And so when they realized how good it was at doing this and how it was able to kind of get access into any networks like no one else has been able to do before, they've decided not to release this to the public. And they're working with many major organizations to figure out how to move forward. Because this technology has progressed. Now that it's created, it's not going anywhere. The Pandora's box is open. So now we want to be safe about it. And so we're in a very interesting time with cybersecurity where we now have AI models that can basically hack into any organization. So we're going to see, I've been closely tracking the research to see how the current companies that are interacting with this model and what their proposed solutions are. But I think where we're at here is your IT department is going to be your best friend from here on out. And cybersecurity, I think, is going to become increasingly important. So it's important to know that in the future, we need to talk a little bit more about cybersecurity and where our data is being kept. Okay, so let's talk about the future. What does agentic mean? I'll get to that in 1 second. And Ian, I just want to confirm, sorry, I had 2 different meeting invites. This goes until 10:15, yes?
Well, mm, we can. So
Okay.
folks, yeah. So yeah. So just let folks know. We'll go to 10:15.
Okay, I apologize. We'll go to 10:15 here. I'll try to be concise. Okay, so let's talk about data strategy really quick. When we're implementing AI, what's important is AI is only as good as the data that we give it. So when you are as a business person, whether you're an executive or maybe you're somewhere else in your organization assisting, you want to consider what data you have, where does this data live, who owns this data, and how accurate and complete it is. Because AI is only as good as the information you give it. So we want to think about where your data is and how you're incorporating it, or else you'll have less efficiency with that AI. So let's talk about this with data strategy and what can go wrong. Something that has recently completely rocked headlines in the tech world is a Claude-powered AI agent deleted a firm's entire database and their backups. This was hitting a lot of headlines and a lot of people had a lot to say about it. But when I read the actual article, it seemed to be not as big of a problem as it seemed. What happened was this organization gave Claude direct access to their production systems. So it gave Claude access to interact, edit, and delete all of their systems, which you never want to do, regardless of if it's a tool of AI or not. You don't want to give a third party access to your systems. Their second mistake is all their data backups were not properly configured or verified. They have all their backups in the same system as their production databases. And then finally, they had absolutely no human oversight. So they had this AI model just working by itself without somebody making sure that things that were being published or pushed were accurate and safe. And so what I like to call this is new tech, old problems. So this is just somebody that was not using the foundational rules of databases. And the new tech found that out and it caused a problem, but this problem wouldn't have been made if they had greater foresight. So the outcome here that was caused by AI was not because AI was dangerous. It was caused by skipping data governance steps that matter with any powerful systems. This is access controls, backups, and human oversights. So it's important that when we're discussing this and we're talking about AI, your IT team is going to be your best friends in the situation, and they know how to make sure that things are set up properly and safely. And so follow them and listen to them. So let's talk about how AI is moving faster than policy. Right now, we have co-pilots and assistants. So this is basically just AI that helps humans draft, summarize, and analyze. Next up, I think we're going to be talking a lot more about AI, agentic AI. So what does agentic mean? Agentic is just AI that can work by itself. So it's working autonomously and it's given a specific task. So I could have an AI agent and its entire purpose is to pull data from one system and generate a report by it. And it will do that every single week so I can see that report. That's agentic AI. Agentic AI is just a smaller AI model that's focusing on doing one specific thing. And then we have multimodal AI, which I think is where we're going at in the future. Multimodal AI is having AI that can interact with docs, it can look at screens, it can hear calls, it can act across systems in real time. That's what I've been working at with IO Digital. Is I'm trying to make a agent that only has the information we give it. So it has just our database. And so different people can ask it questions about our data and what we're using it, but it's only in the organization. And so it's safer, and it can also connect to our SharePoint. And so basically you have a chatbot that has just information that we give it, and you can ask it a bunch of questions, and it will only give you answers based off of what's accurate to the organization. And since it's completely separate from like it's made in-house and it's our own environment, if for some reason an employee decided to put their social security number in to see how it looks, that wouldn't be going to the internet. So that's where I kind of like how AI is moving. I think AI is moving towards having more specific models that are made for singular purposes, that are made off of basic data sets that you have more control over, so you know why the information is giving. You can kind of backtrack where that information is coming from. Okay, let's talk a little bit about positives of artificial intelligence. I'm going to go through this quickly because we have a data governance portion coming up that I think is a little bit more important. Here, technology is supposed to make our lives easier. I think sometimes this gets forgotten by a lot of people in tech, but in general, tech should be making your life better and easier. And so AI can do this in multiple ways. It can do this by automating repetitive tasks like data entry, scheduling, email sorting, which will let you do higher value work and have more time to do things that are, I think, more enjoyable to do. It'll make the hard parts of your jobs, the really terrible, repetitive things, easier to do. AI at its core, the best thing that it can do is summarize large volumes of information. This means that when we go on in the future and as AI is used more, we'll be able to have better decision making because we'll have better analysis of the information that's available to our organization. I also think that generative AI is wonderful to work through technical problems. So if you're somebody that maybe wants to improve their Excel skills and they want to do something and they struggle with Excel, you can always go and you can ask Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT. You can go, hey, I want to make a pivot table, but it's not working. Can you walk me through step by step how to do it? And it will. It makes tech much easier and much more accessible to use, which I especially love. And then finally, it's great at proofreading non-sensitive reports and emails. And so generative AI is especially great here, and it's good at showing spelling, grammar, style, and clarity. Basically, it's going to make your life so much easier. I see somebody say they use it all the time for Excel. Yes, I love it for Excel. I'm a little bit an Excel expert. I used to teach it at university, but I still use AI for Excel all the time. I've learned so much through it, and it makes it much less of a headache where you can have much more impressive spreadsheets. And so we can talk a little bit about what AI has already improved. It's already improved in healthcare and sciences. What's really interesting is AI has led to breakthroughs in predicting protein structure. It's being used in disaster response. And then one small thing I want to discuss here, and before we move on, is education access. Every single person here interacts with tech in a different way. So generative AI makes education more accessible for personalized learning experiences. Maybe I'm more of a visual learner, while somebody else in here likes to more just talk through how they find things. And we both study in different ways. Generative AI will figure out what way studies best, like what mode of study works best for you, and figure out next steps and help you work through that way of study. And it's especially great if maybe you're not great at English and you're struggling to read, and maybe the textbook you have is overly pedantic and you don't understand what it's trying to say. You can put this into AI models and it will help you explain it and break it down. What I had recommended to researchers when AI was first coming out is putting abstracts of articles into AI and having it break it down to you like you're 5, and you can figure out if that article is something you want to go on to and talk about more or not, especially for those non-native English speakers where research writing can be very pedantic and very verbose. This makes it faster for them and more accessible for them. Okay, So let's talk about using AI well. So when we are talking about prompt engineering, that's just how you're writing prompts and interacting with prompts. You want to be more specific. So instead of just saying, tell me about Pride and Prejudice, you want to say, not summarize this in 3 sentences. When you give it more information, you will have it more to work with. So oftentimes, if I'm writing an email, I'm not going to just say, please write an email as to why I can't make it to this meeting. I'll probably say, please help me write an email that I can't make it to this meeting because, and then I'll have like a bulleted list under like, because I have another meeting that overlaps with it. Then after that, apologize and say, can we reschedule for this time and this time? The 2 differences between those prompts will have much better responses and it will be more accurate and more useful to you. Another thing that's really important with generative AI that I don't see many people do is follow-up questions. Always ask follow-up questions. And so when you're discussing with it, you can say, like, can you explain this in simpler terms? Or maybe you can say, what's a step-by-step approach? You don't need to get it right in one turn. You don't need to get it perfect by just one question. Keep on asking it. Keep on getting it to where you want it to be. Don't feel bad about having it be not quite where you want it to be after one question. Keep on asking it. And one of my favorite follow-up questions is, can you remove M dashes, please? This is becoming less of a problem, but earlier ChatGPT models would use so many M dashes out of nowhere, and it would be a very telltale sign of utilizing AI, and it was a way that I didn't like. I see somebody say, I've seen a lot of organizations say that we should give AI a persona when we're prompting. Is that necessarily good for a response? That can be good. I think giving it a persona will help it. You can kind of give it a personality of how it likes to respond. My sister's a writer and she uses Claude for research. She doesn't use it to write her books, but she uses it to figure out like parts of her book. So she's writing a book that takes place in Colorado. And so her AI model knows, her Claude knows that she's writing this book in Colorado, and she likes to get straight to the point with things. So it will just immediately give facts and the resources of where it got those facts and move on. And so having that persona for her makes it work faster. Okay, so the social contract of AI. People generally don't respond well to copy and pasted AI content. So while AI is a powerful tool, it's really important to have that human element for multiple reasons. One, AI isn't always accurate. We know it hallucinates. But 2, if you're just copying and pasting things from ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and sending it out, it's going to look poorly on you. Think about this right now. If you had a book that was 100% generated by AI and you could buy it right now in a Barnes and Noble, would you buy it? Why or why not? Me personally, I would not buy it. My reasoning here being, if this was fully generated by AI, why don't I just go home and I make that book myself and I figure out what I do want? And so if you over rely on AI without having that human element, you might devalue the quality of your own work and you might harm relationships that you have crafted in your own business. Okay, so let's talk about AI governance. And so this is focusing specifically on AI implementation. We do have one more session later this month that's going to be very similar to this. So if you have any friends that you think might be interested or any peers that might enjoy this session, please recommend it to them. I always love teaching other people about AI. And then later on in October, we'll have 2 sessions that go much more detailed view of AI and kind of talking more about AI implementation. So just discussing a little bit about next upcoming opportunities before we get to the last part. Okay, AI governance. So this is your organizational framework and what we're talking about here. So if you are trying to implement AI in your organization, especially at a leadership level, it's very important to consider a few things. One, who owns AI decisions? So if AI is making a decision, let's say AI decides to give a coupon to a customer who complained, who is responsible for that? Next up, what data is allowed in AI tools? You should consider, if your organization does not already, have a tiered classification. So have data that's allowed and have data that might not be allowed and data that's fully prohibited. Consider what information you might want to give to it and what you want to move from there on. Next up, we want to think about what tools are approved. Not all tools are created equal, and some tools have much greater security concerns than others. I know, for example, Auto AI, which is a Zoom like summarization tool, is currently facing a lawsuit because they were training every single meeting that you had off of that data, even when it said it did not. So it's important when you are talking about this, what tools, what AI tools do you want to have approved and what don't you? And then next, we want to think about what approvals should we have needed for AI projects? Do we want to have things written down? Do we want to discuss it? Where do we want to accept this and who's responsible for that? And then finally, who's auditing usage? Although AI might have kind of that black box model, you're still responsible for it. So how do we make sure that the usage is being viewed by humans? So maybe that AI doesn't accidentally delete your entire database and your backups. So consider a few of these questions if you are in the middle of implementing AI into your organization. Finally, let's talk about the last 5 questions that I think you should consider when we're talking about AI business implementation. Number 1, what business process are we improving? So using AI is not a strategy. We want to talk about maybe specific things with AI that we want to do. So be more specific with your goals for AI, because if you're too broad, you won't find value from it. So what specific business process would you want to improve with AI? From there, you want to go with what data is involved. Classify it. What department owns this data? Is this data PII? Is it sensitive? Where does it go? Is there any laws or regulations that's applying to it? Next up, you'd want to ask, what's the security and privacy risk? Who sees this output? Where are you putting this data into? Is this important that you have it? Is there any ramifications if this tool has wrong results? Next up, we want to talk about, what does success look like? So how do we measure success? This is especially important. I think most organizations are stuck in what's called the pilot phase, where AI is being tested, but it's not going on beyond being tested. And in 2026, we need to leave this pilot phase. AI is a part of the business. And if leadership is not accepting it, then there'll be what's called shadow AI use, where employees will use it without leadership being conscientious of it or aware of it. So define success so you can better implement AI. And then finally, who owns this long term? You as a business will probably be on the hook for decisions that AI makes. So it's important that you have a chain of command with AI and people who are designated to deal with any problems that might happen. All right. Finally, what I like to say is AI is not magic. It's also not neutral. It does reflect our data, our choices, and our governance. So it's really important that when we're using data, it's only as good as the information we give it, which is a great thing because that means that we have a lot of control over how it works and how it can benefit us. I think the organizations that will thrive here are not just the ones that use the most AI or use no AI, but the ones that incorporate AI thoughtfully. Thank you so much for your time today, and questions are welcome. I'll be here for a few minutes after this.
All right. Thank you, Tassia. Wow, that was fantastic. Please, everyone, help me thank Tassia. That was fantastic. Any questions? Any questions for Tassia? I learned a lot, and I've been doing this for a while, so this was fantastic. Thank you so much, Tassia. By the way, I'm gonna put in the chat information about the follow-on workshops that is coming up. So there's a repeat of this session on May 26th. And then Tassia and PICHTR is offering a hands-on, in-person, deeper dive. It's a 4-hour workshop that'll be held at our offices. And I put in the chat the, I think the Eventbrite information. That one is October 2nd or November 13th. So you have 2 dates to choose from. But questions, comments.
And a small note on the deeper dive hands-on experiences is when it comes to AI, this industry is moving so fast that information that I told you today might not be up to date within 6 months. Things are moving so quickly that as we continue, I've kind of made it my full-time job to be on top of everything that's happening. but it's unreasonable to expect the average person to do that. So as we are discussing, and when we get to October 2nd and November 3rd, I'm sure the entire industry and landscape will have changed quite dramatically. And so there will be a whole plethora of new things to talk about. I mean, Claude Mythos just came out last week, and it completely derailed my lesson plans and made me had to restructure how I was talking about things to address that. And I'm sure that'll happen at least 4 more times before we get to October.
Yeah. More recently too, ChatGPT updated their image generation model, and for the last year, it would always get like images incorrect when it came to having it recreate like a certain images, and now all of a sudden it just huge step change, like just went from being really really bad to absolutely like rivaling Gemini. So Gemini has great images that it generates, very accurate. Okay, questions.
Should expect government to set policies. Ideally, yes, I hope the government does set policies, but I think the government is always more than a few steps behind the curve. So if you want to be on top of it and make sure that your organization is prepared, your organization should set policies specific to your organization and internally. I hope to see the government continuing to discuss this and interact with this, but I would expect that to be a little bit slower.
Questions, comments? Yeah, to Tassia's point, this stuff is actually changing almost like weekly, daily.
It is. Every day it's a new thing.
And things that, again, like were so bad a week ago, or just bad for like ever, and then all of a sudden last week, boom, this thing just makes this huge, in this case, ChatGPT, in terms of the image generation, makes this huge jump. Any other comments, thoughts? So please, with that, please again check out if you have family and friends that want to come to this free online webinar. The next one is May 26th. I put it in the chat, or you can also find it on Eventbrite. I think we made this publicly available, aware. Then there's the actual 4-hour workshop, October 2nd or October 13th. And with that,
I see
thank you, everybody.
I apologize.
Ian, that's November 13th.
November 13th. Sorry. Yeah, November 13th. Sorry. Thanks.
Do you think that the progression of AI, that more jobs will eventually be eliminated? I think jobs will in general be restructured. I think a few jobs are at risk, but not that. My personal opinion here is a lot of the headlines saying that every single job is going to replace isn't accurate. I think there's going to be some restructuring of a few jobs, but as always with new tech, when jobs are lost or restructured, more jobs are created. So I know this is something that's a wide range of discussion, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions from it. From me as somebody who's in it, and I try very hard to be rational about AI, I think it will have impacts on the job market, but I don't think we're all going to be unemployed because of it. I think if we just look at how AI could time a mile, it couldn't do it very well. And that's going to continue to be a problem. And so it's important to be aware of AI and utilizing it so you know how to interact with it in the future and how it might interact with your job. But I don't think it's going to be the end of the white collar world as a lot of headlines like to say it will be.
You have some more questions, Tassia?
Oh, yeah, I see. Okay, what would you suggest to smaller organizations who may not have an AI governance committee? For those smaller organizations, I would start off with just discussing having like your data and start actually writing down where your data is and where it's kept. That's the first step, is data strategy. I know there is some outsourcing. Other organizations will do data strategy for you if your organization can't afford that. If not, just start writing things down, figuring out where you're at, and having active dialogues with your IT department if you have that, or have somebody who maybe is more tech savvy and ask them if they can help you with that and start to own that. And so start off with data strategy, where your data lives, where it needs to be. And then you can actually find some templates of AI policies online, and you can start to think about where that might be relevant to your organization and move from there. Next up, we have the question of what model do you recommend, or do you use multiple models depending on what you're doing? In general, I tend to use multiple models. I love Claude for, I think, the most accurate information. Claude is also very great at creating visual aids, specifically like PowerPoints. So if you want to do anything that's visual, I would recommend Claude. In terms of tone, I tend to like the text tone of ChatGPT the most, but my eye has been on Google Gemini for a while. I suspect that Google Gemini is going to take over the market here soon because Google is just such a massive organization with so much reach. So I use a little bit of everything, but if I had to buy a subscription for one single program, it would probably be Claude. And the human touch is important. I love that this was emphasized here. Yes, I don't think AI is going to replace people. I don't think it can replace people. I love AI. I think it's a wonderful tool, but I don't think that it can replace what we have. Our brains are insane and intelligent and incredible. And that's not something that can just be replaced by a computer. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. With that, thank you, everyone. Please join me again in thanking Tassia. Great job. And we'll see you all on hopefully another one of our future sessions. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Take care. Aloha.
Take care.
Thanks, Tassia. Great job.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, you have a nice day.
You too.
All right,
See you
bye.
again.